to discuss caregiving and communication, navigating family dynamics. This will be the first of 3 webinars that will focus on special topics related to caregiving and communication. We invite you to join us for any or all of these sessions. My name is Kira Freeman. I'm the Corporate Education and Relations Contact here at Elder Health. As always, I'll be sending out the link to the recorded webinar later this afternoon, and I'll also be sharing a tangible tool that connects to today's discussion. This can also be found in Elder Health's online courses, and I'll explain more about those in just a few minutes. During this webinar, if you're comfortable with sharing, I'd like to encourage everyone to submit their comments, questions, and even stories using the chat box on your screen. I want to mention that, like all topics in caregiving, this subject can be very complex and emotionally charged, and there may be some questions that just don't have easy answers. And so one of the things that I hope you might take away from today is that if you're in a very difficult situation, that you're not alone in that, and if you need some resources and support, we're here to help you. Before we dive into the content, I just want to share a few things about Elder Health. We are a private nonprofit organization. We've been around since 1973, and our mission is to provide personalized services and information that help seniors remain independent and live with dignity in their own homes. We provide direct services through volunteers to assist with help in the home and transportation, and we also offer care coordination and roommate matching services. A few years ago, we created the Employed Family Caregiver Support Program to provide resources and education specifically to employed family caregivers, but the content that we've developed through this program is relevant for all family caregivers. And through this program, we offer on-site presentations and workshops at local corporations and companies. We can participate in employee health and wellness expos. We offer these webinars on a monthly basis. And then this month, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about our online courses. So on our website, we have our series of online courses called Preparing for Your Unique Journey. Elder Health's team of aging experts created this series with valuable resources and other tangible tools to help caregivers better understand their roles. Designed with busy schedules in mind, each course is brief and can be completed in 30 minutes or less. We invite you to explore these courses today at elderhealth.thinkific.com. So to dive into our topic of family dynamics, I wanted to share that just last week I read a story from a book called The Moth Presents All These Wonders, True Stories About Facing the Unknown. And The Moth, if you aren't familiar with it, is a nonprofit group that presents theme-based storytelling events across the United States and abroad. This book is a compilation of stories told in front of live audiences. And this particular story that I read is called Stumbling in the Dark. And in it, author and actor John Turturro tells of picking up his mother, who's a widowed woman in her 80s, to visit his brother who has severe mental health issues and is living in an institution. And this is something they do together frequently, but some unusual events happen on this day that he drops us into. And I want to share the closing lines of his story. I get in my car and I make my way back to Brooklyn, and I'm thinking about the fact that we imagine that we live in the light. We imagine that we can foresee what's going to happen. We imagine that we can control everything. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But the reality is, almost all of us are just stumbling around in the dark, searching, trying to find some kind of home, while we're juggling all these balls, and hopefully, on most days, keeping them afloat. And I wanted to share these thoughts with you from a caregiver who is balancing his time between his mother and his brother and his own family, and feeling guilt and pulled in every direction, because I think it does capture how we often feel as caregivers, particularly as we navigate unique family dynamics. Ideally, when we provide care to a loved one, this presents an opportunity for family members to come together as a care team and offer mutual support to one another. But in reality, caregiving often is a stressful life transition, and the pressure can lead to conflict and strained connections. Difficult family dynamics manifest in any number of ways, and I'd like to share just a few real-life examples with you. The first is that a brother and sister who have been close their whole lives share caregiving responsibilities as their father's dementia progresses. The siblings feel strongly about supporting their father in his own home for as long as possible, but the brother's wife feels that he should move into a long-term care facility. The brother feels torn between his wife, sister, and father, and disagreements begin to cause tension. Another example, despite living 700 miles away from her ailing parents, a daughter coordinates all aspects of their care, from scheduling doctor's appointments and in-home care to managing their finances. She's growing resentful of her sister, who lives in the same town as her parents but is providing very little help. "You're single," her sister says. "You have more time than I do." And then, of course, an opposite scenario can also occur, and you may even be experiencing this. So, for instance, an adult son takes control of caregiving responsibilities and finances for his mother and shuts out all of his other siblings, despite the fact that they prefer to be involved. Of course, it's important in these situations when we're talking about examples or thinking about the own situations that we're in, to evaluate competing perspectives and motivations to the extent possible. So when we're thinking about the previous example of the brother's wife who feels that her father-in-law should move into a long-term care facility, we can maybe think about what might be motivating her. So is she disgruntled, or does she genuinely feel like this might be a better option for him? What's her relationship with her father-in-law? What's the brother and sister's relationship with their father, and how are they coping with his illness? Is it safe for the father to live at home in the community? And who gets to have input into that decision and ultimately make the decision? And how does he feel about the situation if he's still able to express that? So these and many other questions that go into scenarios like this highlight the complexities of family dynamics. For the purposes of today's webinar, I'd like to highlight sibling and in-law relationships in the context of communication when multiple caregivers are involved. And some of the strategies that we're going to talk about here, like creating a care team, for instance, can be applied to other relationships as well. So for instance, if a neighbor is involved in the care of your loved one, or a friend, or step-parents or step-siblings. But thinking specifically about siblings, there are many sources of conflict that can spark tension between siblings who are caring for aging parents. The most frequent of these is unequal division of caregiving duties. Typically, one sibling will take on or maybe gradually fall into the role of primary caregiver. And this may be because of geography or perceived or actual work and family obligations or family relationships, assumptions about who should handle what, or maybe a combination of all of those things. And this kind of structure can lead the primary caregiver to feel overburdened and for other siblings to feel uninformed or left out. For many, caregiving also represents a new kind of family transition. And this is especially true today as people are living longer with chronic conditions. What this means is that today's older adult children may not have grown up with a model for how to handle caregiving and the financial, physical, and emotional needs that come with that. The demands of caregiving may also bring out old patterns and unresolved issues. Childhood rivalries often reemerge, recreating old dynamics and of competition and resentment. Family possessions and finances are also a frequent source of conflict. And then, of course, watching parents become ill and pass away is one of the hardest things in life. And so everyone will process it differently, and we may not even be conscious of those feelings. So, for example, a son may not be accepting the reality of his mother's illness. And in sort of a subconscious attempt to avoid facing his mother's eventual death, he refuses involvement in her care. And his brother, who is shouldering all of the caregiving responsibilities, understandably reacts with anger. Planning and effective communication strategies may help to prevent or even mitigate some of the conflict among family caregivers. And this in turn can improve our capacity to care for aging parents and maintain or even strengthen our sibling relationships. Before we review these suggestions, I do want to acknowledge that they may not be appropriate for every family or circumstance. This can sometimes be due to long-time challenges or even new issues that pop up during the caregiving journey. If you feel like you're in this place, or if you're in this place, please know that you're not alone. Seeking assistance, like a support group, for instance, to navigate a situation that may just be beyond your control, may be helpful. It may also be helpful to seek outside assistance to get a break from caregiving. With that said, here are some general tips for coming together with siblings. Ask for help when it's needed and accept it when it's offered. Be clear about what you need support with. And I'm going to jump to the next slide just for a moment so you can see some questions to think about. Do you want a sibling to help with certain tasks on a regular basis? Do you want them to take over for the day so that you can get some rest? Do you need them to contribute more financially? Or do you need more emotional support? And that does include appreciation. Recognize that fair may not always mean equal. As mentioned previously, the majority of caregiving responsibilities often do fall to one or two people. So accepting this and delegating tasks where you can and where it's appropriate can help to reduce conflict and resentment. Create a care team. Identify the strengths and availability of other individuals in your team, including those who provide support from a distance. And I want to mention that we have a great tool in course 2 of our online courses that's called the Caregiver Needs Assessment. And you can use this worksheet to take inventory of your caregiving responsibility and identify areas where other members of your care team can support you. And that way you can begin to articulate some of these things and document them and share them with your team and have them evolve on an ongoing basis. And so I'll share that PDF document with you later today along with the link. Keep in mind that this process may require you to take a fresh look at your siblings. Parents naturally create labels and roles for young children, and these are adopted and assumed to be true. But as we get older, we need to re-examine them. So if, for instance, you've always been the quote-unquote responsible daughter, that doesn't mean that you must continue doing everything just because you always have. It may, however, mean that you need to help your siblings see that you can adapt to some new roles based on where you are today. If realistic, try to respect other perspectives, avoid assumptions, and find opportunities to compromise. If conflict arises, focus the conversation on the concrete issue at hand versus who's right, who cares the most, or who knows your parents best. Accept your siblings and your parents where they are. And remember that we all have different relationships with our parents. And that's on top of having different belief systems and caregiving styles and personalities. So outlooks and emotions are bound to be different. Keep siblings informed via email, online care sharing tools, or in-person meetings. And I have some care sharing tools at the end of this presentation on the resource slide. Among other logistical considerations, open communication is also important as it relates to finances. And as a quick note here, I'd recommend avoiding power struggles over a parent's assignment of legal powers. And if your parent has not yet planned for the future, including assigning their POA and other responsibilities, encourage him or her to do that early before a serious illness or unexpected event occurs. And if there's any interest, we can certainly host a specific webinar on care planning in the future. Express appreciation to family members for the help they are able to provide. And if needed, arrange a family meeting that includes a professional mediator, like a social worker or a counselor, or a neutral third party. This is especially important as families do have long histories that just may be complicated. This can make it difficult for us to communicate about caregiving without overreacting and rehashing old battles. And then just sort of as an aside here, we've touched a little bit on the concept of caring at a distance and involving long-distance caregivers in the care team. And there are some unique challenges that are involved in being a long-distance caregiver, like time differences, travel time, and expenses, and then, access to complete information, uncertainty of when to intervene, guilt, and other things. If you're a long-distance caregiver, consider the following tips. Coordinate with a primary caregiver. Call and ask if there's anything they need, and gather updates about your loved one's health so that you can be prepared for any changes. Leave a set of clothes, shoes, and toiletries at the home of the caregiver or your loved one. This can make traveling easier and less stressful, particularly if you have to jump on a plane right away. Consider the length of your visit and set realistic goals to accomplish while you're in town. So as I mentioned, the strategies that we've presented in this webinar may be useful in your relationships with other caregivers, but I would like to also share a few specifics around caregiving for a mother-in-law or a father-in-law. And you may be doing that right now. For many, caring for an in-law is very different than caring for a parent. Whether it's any harder or easier depends pretty heavily on the relationship and the situation. So on the one hand, some people are naturally more patient with their own parents because they have a longer shared history. On the other hand, for those who clash with their parents, having a spouse or partner act as a primary caregiver may reduce tension. As another example, more intimate tasks like bathing or dressing can be more awkward between in-laws. On the other hand, a mother, for example, may be more comfortable asking for that type or level of assistance from a daughter-in-law before a son. Caregiving for an in-law may strain a marital relationship, particularly when the caregiver doesn't feel appreciated or receive help from the spouse or their siblings, isn't particularly fond of their in-law, or has all of the responsibility but none of the decision-making ability. And so these communication strategies may be helpful for caregivers who are supporting the mother and father-in-law, and several of these overlap with some of the suggestions we discussed previously. Ask for help from your spouse and his or her family to delegate tasks. Outline expectations and responsibilities, including boundaries, limits, and backup support. Again, I'm going to jump ahead here for just a minute so you can see some questions to consider. What can you do? What are you willing to do? And what are you uncomfortable doing? And protect yourself. Provide help, but within reason. If your in-law is abusive, unappreciative, or causing a marital rift, help your spouse and his or her family to find an alternate arrangement. Be empathetic of your in-law's perspective as much as possible. So remember that they may also be experiencing a range of emotions and feelings, from fear to anger, frustration, depression, helplessness, pain, loss of control, and potentially even embarrassment. It may be helpful if you have children. It might be helpful to remember that they're sort of observing you in your interactions and they're learning from you. And then know that it's natural to feel less than positive about your in-law and or the caregiving situation. So we've talked quite a bit about communication when multiple caregivers are involved. And we can continue this conversation during Q&A or offline if anybody has any other specific questions, stories, or experiences to share. But in the context of this larger discussion of caregiving and navigating family dynamics, I would also like to talk a little bit about communicating with children of all ages. The grandparent-grandchild relationship may be most relevant in this discussion. While everyone ages differently, there are certain age-related changes that have the most impact on children. These may include changes in a grandparent or loved one's energy levels, declining health, mental changes, or changes in housing. So for instance, if a grandparent moves to a long-term care facility. It is important to share information about these changes with children. Life transitions are inevitable, but children need some help processing them, and a lack of knowledge can lead to uncertainty. Being informed may enable children to trust that they're going to receive the information they need, feel safe to ask questions and share their feelings, and be able to contribute in their own way. Of course, every family will need to determine what information can and should be shared with their child, but here are a few general tips. Plan for the conversation. Decide when and where to have it. So for instance, would it be better to have the conversation in the morning versus at bedtime? Would it be better to have it on the couch versus in the car? Talk with other adults, role play, and look for resources, and that may include age-appropriate books. Be aware of your tone and body language, and think about your child's ability to process and comprehend the information. Ask open-ended questions to help put your child at ease. This may help you to figure out what's worrying them, but it can also help them to begin to articulate and express their thoughts. Of course, younger children can't always label their feelings, and they may be expressing them through actions. If it's appropriate, you might consider sharing the name of the illness, the ways that your child could help the family member, and potential changes that might be made to the home environment. Keep your explanations simple and discuss your child's feelings while you help ease their concerns. Focus on the positive. Positive interactions with grandparents typically are still possible, but some adjustments may just need to be made. And this may especially be true if your loved one has been diagnosed with dementia. And we'll be discussing this a little bit further in May during our third session of the Caregiving and Communication series. Acknowledge that every child is different. Some children will want to be involved in helping to care for their grandparents, while others might feel frightened or confused by the situation. And lean on teachers and other caregivers who have trusting relationship with your child for support. They may be able to provide your child with some extra love and attention if your focus is being pulled in a lot of different directions. And they may also be aware of some feelings that are being expressed by different behaviors. And here are just some of those things to think about that I just mentioned. A 2009 study from the National Alliance of Caregiving and AARP estimated that more than a third of caregiving families had children under the age of 18 living at home, and that 1.3 million American children participated in caregiving activities. And keep in mind that as the population of caregivers has continued to expand, it's likely that this number has continued to grow as well. Children are impacted by caregiving in both positive and negative ways. So for instance, caregiving may teach children more deeply about the meaning of family support. It may also prepare children more effectively for the future, providing a model for how to handle caregiving responsibilities that today's older adult children may not have. They may feel proud of their contributions and their ability to make a positive difference, whether it's making their Nana giggle or helping a grandpa put away his groceries. And this can lead to growth in moral character. However, depending on the child, the situation, the level of responsibility, and the family relationships, children who participate in caregiving may feel burdened or resentful, and this can put them at a higher risk for developing depression and anxiety. Parents who are shouldering heavy caregiving responsibilities may also be less available for children. To maximize the benefits of caregiving and minimize its negative effects on children, parents may consider seeking a balance by prioritizing childhood and play first over caregiving tasks. And this is even if your child really enjoys helping out and being part of the care team, and kind of evaluating the effect that caregiving might have on their development. Using age and maturity as a guide for caregiving duties. So young children may be asked to maybe offer enthusiasm or laughter and silliness and love to older family members. Teenagers may be more capable of providing assistance with various tasks, but they may be more concerned about losing their personal time, and they may be a little bit oppositional for that reason. Children between the ages of 7 and 12 may be more able to assess than young children, a little less oppositional than teenagers. But always give your children a choice about if and how they'd like to participate in caregiving. Avoid pressure. Caregiving is not exactly like a household chore, so if your child is uncomfortable with a task, allow them to say no. And then, try to carve out some time to focus exclusively on your children and on play and having fun. As caregivers, we naturally are hyper-focused on the needs of one family member, and this can mean that our own families are out of balance. That's normal, and just do the very best you can with the time you have available. We have a few resources here to share with you. So the first is the link to our courses, and specifically Course 2 on family-centered care planning. And then there's 2 tools here that can be used to help you keep your care team informed, caringbridge.org and CareZone. I wanted to share the save the dates for the next webinar. The next webinars in our Caregiving and Communication series are April 18th and May 16th. And then at this point, I'd like to go ahead and open it up for your comments, questions, and stories. If you feel comfortable sharing, please feel free to submit your thoughts using the chat box. And we can also, if you'd prefer, we could also talk offline as well. And this is my contact information on how to reach me. So I'm going to hang around for just a few minutes in case anybody has any questions. Otherwise, I want to thank you for joining us today to discuss this topic.